All right, let's continue our discussion here about the devastating train derailment in Ohio. It certainly has put Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg in the spotlight, but for all the wrong reasons. This week, there were angry residents of East Palestine in Ohio, and in fact, they gathered for a town hall, and they started chanting, "Where's Pete Buttigieg?" Of course, he didn't help himself when he failed to even comment about the disaster until 10 days after it happened. And get this, the mayor of East Palestine told residents that this Tuesday was even the first time that he had heard anything from the White House. So what does this tell us about the Biden administration's priorities? Well, with me now to continue this conversation is Joshua Arnold. He's a staff writer at the Washington Stand, and he reported on this. So, Joshua, thank you so much for joining me. Glad to have you on Washington Watch.
Hi, Jody. Glad to be here.
Well, thank you so much. I don't know if you were able to hear any of the discussion that I just had with Congressman Bill Johnson, whose district it is where all of this disaster has occurred. But this is a terrible situation for the residents of northeastern Ohio. And look, we may not know the full extent of all the environmental outcomes of this thing for weeks or perhaps even months. And Secretary Buttigieg didn't even make any remarks about this for 10 days until this Monday. Is that correct?
It really is incredible. If you haven't seen the footage of the flame, it looks like something out of the movies. The derailment happened on February 3rd, and Mayor Pete didn't comment until February 13th. That's 10 days later. And in fact, he only commented not because he finally got around to it, but because he was speaking at a lobbyist conference in D.C. and didn't mention it at all, and a bunch of people got on his case, and then he decided he had to comment. So when I asked the Department of Transportation on Tuesday what he had to say about it, they directed me to his tweets from Monday night after he'd already been taking criticism.
Yeah, and it was on Monday that he talked about the priorities that we have all that we share. And in fact, I want to play a little clip here for you and get your response to this.
We have heard way too many stories from generations past of infrastructure where you got a neighborhood, often a neighborhood of color, that finally sees the project come to them, but everyone in the hard hats on that project looking like, doing the good paying jobs, don't look like they came from anywhere near the neighborhood.
All right, I don't know if you could hear that or not, but we may have been having a little difficulties with this. But look, this train derailment is not just a problem in East Palestine. Is that correct?
That's correct, Jody. According to research done by Newsweek, they've confirmed at least 12 other derailments so far this year. Some of them have been with trains also carrying hazardous materials. In fact, I think today or yesterday there was another train near Detroit that derailed that also had hazardous materials. But their research showed that all the way back to 1990, there's been an average of about 1,700 train derailments every single year. And Secretary Buttigieg, he goes to this conference, and what does he have to talk about? Well, he talked about how there's too many white construction workers, too many people driving gas cars, too many traffic deaths. Some of these things we can talk about, but when there's a pressing crisis, you've got to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just unbelievable. And that was part of the clip was the ridiculous priorities coming at a time of disaster. Listen, are you aware with the derailment of hazardous material now in Michigan? Is there any response from the Secretary or the federal government there yet?
I haven't been following the issue closely. I do know that Secretary Buttigieg just didn't seem to be involved with this response as well. He seems to be leaving it to other agencies like the EPA or the National Transportation Safety Board, when his department, the Department of Transportation, should be playing a role in this as well. And that's a common thread we've seen throughout his time as secretary.
Yeah, that's really true. And look, certainly you can't put all the blame for every transportation disaster or crisis on him, but the response from him to these incidents and crises are all his fault, but it's certainly his responsibility. Can you remind us of some of the issues that have taken place under the crises, if you will, that have taken place under the time frame of Buttigieg?
Sure. 4 quick examples going back to 2021. So think back to last year. We were just coming out of the COVID lockdowns, and we figured that as the economy picked back up, we were going to have a little bit of a bottleneck getting goods into our ports from overseas. But it turned into a major bottleneck because of a shortage of truckers, issues with the dock worker unions, and instead of doing anything to fix these problems, Secretary Buttigieg really didn't accomplish anything. They just kind of kept being a problem. Several months into it, he went on leave for 2 months. He and his husband, Chasen, adopted 2 children, and he just took 2 months off. There was a supply chain disruption task force that he didn't attend meetings for 6 weeks, and they didn't tell anybody. He just wasn't there. Fast forward to this year, there was going to be a strike of the freight rail workers union. We knew it was coming. We knew what date they were set to strike on. 2 weeks before it was set to happen, Secretary Buttigieg goes on an international vacation. He goes to Portugal for a week. Finally, at the last minute, they managed to prevent this crisis from stopping our supply chains again, but he didn't have any hand in it. It was a marathon 20-hour work session spearheaded by Labor Secretary Marty Walsh, who actually just left the administration. It was announced today he's leaving. But while that negotiation was going on in Washington, Mayor Pete was touring the Detroit Auto Show. So he didn't have anything to do with that either. Then we had the holiday flight disaster. So we've had issues with airplane flights getting canceled all throughout this year. In September, Secretary Buttigieg said on national television that this would all be solved by the holidays. Of course, we know that it wasn't. There was a horrific snarl around the holidays. Now, a lot of that was factors beyond his control. There was a major meltdown with one of the major airlines. There was a giant blizzard that affected some flights as well. But there was a letter from 38 attorneys general.
Joshua, we're going to have to land the plane here. We've got about 15 seconds here.
Okay, sure. And the main thing is that Pete Buttigieg just, he's all about identity politics and not about helping the trains run on time.
Joshua, Arnold, thank you for joining us on Washington Watch.